Hello, I'm Bay Mud, and let's get right into it as I've got something many of you will be curious about. It's the new Zoom L6max, and today we're going to do a quick comparison between it and the original L6. What's different? What's the same? What issues did they fix? And which one is right for you? Oh, and a surprise showstopper that I ran into midway through trying to make this video. First off, I bought both of these units with my own money and nobody asked for this video. I just thought it would be potentially interesting and helpful to anyone wondering about these two units. And I happen to have a use case for each one, so why not? Speaking of money, let's get that out of the way too. In Canada, the L6 retails for about 439 maple syrups and the max is $529. So you're talking around $100 difference after tax, give or take. I was able to get a slight discount on each when I bought each one, which is why we're here. I'm not made of maple syrup. And at the risk of becoming a channel dedicated solely to little Zoom mixers, we'll save a tutorial on any brand new features for later and focus on a quick overview with some opinions mixed in. That said, I have to address a pretty big issue for me right off the top. Eagle-eyed viewers will notice the mic and USB cable are connected to the original L6 and not the new L6max. That's because partway through making this video, I realized my admittedly older Android phone is not supported by the Max, even though it works fine with the original L6. So if using one of these with your phone is important to you, make sure you check the list of supported devices first. I've reached out to Zoom support for more info, but it looks like the Max has mostly been tested with newer phones. It's funny, as the original L6 had issues with iOS that had to get patched in a firmware update, so I guess it's only fair that Android gets some of the love, or lack thereof, too. For what it's worth, I never noticed the Android issue as I've been happily using the L6max as a USB recording interface with my PC and it's been great. However, it means I won't be able to include audio from the L6max until I sort that out. Okay, back to the comparison. For starters, hopefully the size difference is obvious. The L6max is only about 2.5 inches bigger, but that can be a lot depending on your setup. I recall looking up the dimensions in advance, but was surprised by how much larger it felt in person. The Max makes the original L6 look comparatively cute and super portable, which it is. Most of this increased size comes from 2 more channels of combo XLR/quarter-inch jacks, and I saw that some folks were disappointed by this as they would have preferred more stereo channels. The good news here at least is that these new channels come with high-Z options for things like guitar, but that may or may not be useful to you depending on your needs. That's a bit of a theme here as this mixer seems to be trying to be a lot of things at once. There's also a new sub-mix output, which we'll get to, but most notably a screen with buttons that let you do all kinds of things as long as you have tiny little doll fingers. Oh, good luck for me, I guess. The 4 stereo channels also now have handy gain pad switches for extra loud signals, but they don't add to the size of the unit, which is what we've been focusing on here. Now, if you've seen any of my older videos on the L6, you'll know I have a list of limitations that annoyed me with that unit, even though I still enjoy using it and find it indispensable in a small live setup. So let's see which of those the L6max addresses and which limitations are the same. First up, my biggest gripe with the L6, and I've mentioned this a lot, but you can't mute the main output without also muting the headphones. Basically, the headphones are after the mains in the signal flow, so if you turn the mains down, you lose the headphones too, which can be annoying as sometimes you need headphones only, like recording vocals without feedback, for example. Solutions to this include swapping the mains and headphone outputs via audio adapters, but that only works in an unbalanced setup, or using an external monitor controller like a Mackie Big Knob or equivalent, and finally, just unplugging or turning off your speakers, which seems cumbersome if this is meant to sit on your desk all the time. The good news is the L6max has completely addressed this, as you can select which audio signal is sent to the monitor and also the new sub-mix output. Press the tiny menu button, scroll to Mixer, then choose Monitor Output, and the options are Pre-Master Fader plus Compressor, and Post-Master Fader. The pre-master fader options let you adjust the outputs independently, while the post-fader option is the same as how the regular L6 behaves now. And before you ask, no, I don't think this could be added to the original L6 via a firmware update, as the signal flow diagrams are quite different. The Max seems to suggest all 3 outputs have their own audio DACs, for example, but maybe I'm wrong and they'll surprise us lowly L6 owners. Whatever the case, the Max solves this problem, so if that's important to you, you may have your decision already. One of my other issues was the fact that the aux sends are mono on the L6, which isn't necessarily uncommon in small mixers, but does mean you have to do some quirky routing hacks if you want to send a stereo signal out and back for processing via stereo effects or samplers, etc. Unfortunately, the aux sends on the L6 Max are still mono, but they do mitigate this a bit with the addition of that stereo submix output. There's an extra button on the panel called Submix, and you simply dial in how much of each channel you want going to that output. Normally, this would be used to send a different mix to a specific monitor source, like a drummer who wants a click track in their headphones, etc. But you can also use it as an extra stereo aux send to a sampler or effects unit, then bring it back in to one of the mixer channels, which is handy. If there's interest, I'll do a video showing that off on its own. Another common gripe or wish that I saw on older L6 videos was the desire for a dedicated return channel for the sends, but that has not changed on the Max. You still have to use up existing mixer channels to return any of the sends, or USB for that matter. But again, that's not uncommon in a mixer of this size. To put that in perspective, if you're using both aux sends and bringing in USB audio, as well as using the submix as a stereo send, you would need to eat up at least 4 channels of the mixer to bring all that back in, leaving you with around half of the channels for actual instruments. Of course, it's unlikely you'd need all that at once. If so, you may already need a bigger mixer, but I figured it was worth mentioning. Another main issue with the original L6 was a lack of deeper control on the device itself. For example, when I talked about what you can do with the sound pads, I mentioned you can only select which sample plays on each pad via the computer editor. Thankfully, the screen on the Max not only means that all editor options are available directly on the unit, like the various effect parameters, for example, but you can also do things like select which sample a particular sound pad plays based on what you have stored on the card, as long as they are in the appropriate folders. I do wish the screen showed values for the knob parameters, as sometimes the LED rings can be tricky to dial in exactly how you want, but maybe Zoom is listening and can consider that for a future update, though I never count on firmware updates. That said, the screen benefits do also extend to the overall recorder functionality, as you can now select and play back previously recorded projects on the card, not just the most recent one like on the L6. The screen also adds new features to the recording section, as you can do things like bounce the 8 tracks of audio down to a single file, then overdub onto it. If there's interest, I'll do a full video on this feature later, as it is a bit quirky. Personally, the screen is handy, but I still like the simple recording options on the original L6, as I think making the recorder more complex starts to complicate the UI and also beg for things like more MIDI control. Speaking of, the MIDI options on the L6 Max seem to be largely the same, which is disappointing, as I'd love more control over things like the start, stop, and recording buttons now that we have more recording options to play with. On the topic of control, some of you have already seen the video on the L6 companion app that my pal and fellow gear enabler Phil created, hi Phil, which adds LFOs and parameter controls to everything on the L6. I tried it with my L6 Max, and some of the controls work, but they don't currently always map to the right channel on the unit, so it will need an update to account for the new channels. I'm told Phil will work on that this week, among other improvements he's been testing, so keep your eye out for that. Okay, now for a new feature that could be a bit divisive. The L6 Max has a new effect in the list of effects options, which they're calling AI noise reduction. This is curious, mostly in the naming, as I'd be very surprised if it was actually AI and not just a marketing term. It seems like everything is AI these days. I'm pretty sure the probiotics in my yogurt are being rebranded as AI as we speak. In this case, I would assume machine learning is more accurate, but that's not as trendy. Much like any FFT noise reduction plugins of the last couple decades, it listens to 3 seconds of room tone and then removes it from the master output, and works pretty well. Personally, I take solace in knowing it's probably just an awkward cash grab use of the term and not actually artificial intelligence living in this little box scrubbing hiss from your signal like the most boring Black Mirror episode. Okay, I wanted to figure out a way to give an audio example of the AI noise reduction, so we've actually got the 2 Zooms connected in series here, with the output of the Max going into the L6 into my phone so you can actually hear something. And what I'll do next is select AI noise reduction from the effects list. You'll notice the tap tempo button blinks. It's now learn in this case because we have to learn the noise profile we're trying to remove. And then I'll crank the level on the microphone here and up the master gain so that we hear that hiss. And when I press the tap button, you'll see it blink faster and remove as much noise as it can. Now I'll bring that back down a bit so that I'm not peaking, but hopefully you heard that noise profile change. And now as long as I don't press that button again or page away through one of the other effects, that noise reduction profile will remain. So for example, if I press this again, you should hear some noise come back up. And there you go. That's the AI noise reduction in a nutshell. So to recap, let's look at the pros and cons of each unit. Pros for the L6 include it's smaller, cheaper, better battery life, and less complex, meaning it's easier to learn how to use. It also features no quote-unquote AI. However, in terms of cons, you can't mute the master without also muting the headphones, which can be a big one depending on your use case. There's also no submix or stereo aux send option, and the onboard recorder is limited, but that's not necessarily a bad thing to me, so your mileage may vary. Personally, I still consider the original L6 a great companion if you have a simple setup and an older Android phone, and value size over complexity. Not to mention, want to save a few bucks. You might even be able to find them used more now as folks upgrade to the Max. Overall, it's been great for recording live sets that I'll never listen to again, and works well as a USB interface. I'll mostly be using mine as part of a small live rig. As for the L6 Max, overall it's a great update, and things like the high Z inputs and pad options on the stereo channels are very welcome, as is the sub mix and updated output routing. Being able to access all the settings via the screen is also great. However, trying to cram all these new features in without ballooning the overall size means that many things on the L6 Max are very condensed. For example, the Max has 4 scenes instead of 3 on the L6, which is great, but they've crammed the scene buttons into half the space, meaning each is a tiny nub, so you may need Homer's special dialing wand to avoid hitting the wrong one. The extra cost also runs the risk of putting the L6 Max into a category with more competition, closer to things like the 1010 Blue Box, for example. Are there any other devices in this price range that you'd recommend taking a look at instead? Whatever the case, I'll be using this for more complex recording scenarios where I have more room and require more outputs, but obviously I won't be able to use it with my current phone, which is unfortunate. Finally, there's one more thing I find infuriating about both these units, and I've meant to mention in prior L6 videos. It's how impossible it is to get the SD card out. I'm half joking, but it is pretty tough. Good thing you can use file browser mode because even my mini hands have no luck here. So that's about it for now. Hopefully this was helpful or interesting to someone out there. If you want to look at the new features on the Max, like the bounce recording stuff, submix routing, and noise reduction, let me know in the comments. And just remember, check the supported devices on the L6 Max page before you buy one, just in case. Thanks for watching.